And welcome to the show, Rosie Lyon, who is a respected vulnerability specialist who has dedicated her career to addressing the intersection of domestic, financial, and economic abuse, particularly within the banking industry. With extensive personal and professional insight into the challenges of financial abuse, Rosie leads initiatives that support vulnerable customers and employees facing economic hardship due to abuse. In 2021, Rosie was named Young Banker of the Year worldwide, an honor that highlights her innovative and compassionate approach to supporting individuals impacted by financial abuse. Her work has been nominated for multiple awards, underscoring her influence and advocacy in promoting awareness and implementing protections within financial institutions. So, welcome to the show, Rosie. It's so great to have you here today.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, and I'm really excited to obviously, get stuck into these questions. But first of all, it would be great for you to share a bit about your own journey and what led you to actually specialize in vulnerability and financial abuse within the banking sector.
Yeah, sure. So, in around 2019, I left a relationship. I didn't realise that I was experiencing any form of domestic abuse. There was no sort of physical altercation, so to speak, because let's be realistic, most people do think of domestic abuse as physical element. I didn't even know what domestic abuse was, but I left a relationship and basically, in a nutshell, the individual, it was a joint mortgage property, individual decided to remain there but refused to pay, sell or leave. So I had no other option but to go down the repossession route with a high street bank that had my mortgage. I had a really poor experience with the high street bank, having to retell my story. They had a lack of understanding of domestic abuse. It really caused my situation to worsen, sort of thing, just because, the lack of support that was there. It took around 3 years to repossess my property, and every month you get a missed payment, your credit scoring goes down. I couldn't even get a phone contract out in my name, let alone, any other accommodation. And I decided from that, so while I was still going through that in 2021, because my property didn't finalise and get officially repossessed till early 2023. But I decided that I didn't want to have to go through something like that ever again, but also I didn't want other people to experience the poor experiences that I had. So that's why I came up with a fairer financial future for sufferers and survivors of domestic abuse. While going through the competition that's hosted by the Chartered Banker Institute, I started to actually implement my idea into the banking sector, speaking to lots of regulatory bodies and really raising awareness of my lived experience. I created LinkedIn because I didn't have it before. I did my first post. It was like a trending post that everybody was sort of doing at the time. I did it and it got over 150,000 views. And it sort of went from there, really. Lots of sort of organisation, charities, individuals reached out to me wanting to do work with me or me to come and do a talk or different things like that. So yeah, I won the competition and I sort of morphed my sort of career into vulnerability because of my passion with my lived experience, and I continue to do everything to this day.
Wow, amazing. That is such a story of inspiration. And financial abuse is a very overlooked aspect of domestic abuse. And, not many people even realize that they're being financially abused. So, how would you define that for listeners who may be unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, I mean, how I'd sort of define that is that you've got economic and financial abuse. They come hand in hand, but economic abuse is more of the wider umbrella, so to speak. So it covers a lot more than financial abuse does. But it's so wide. So it really depends on a person's circumstances. It goes from, maybe, for example, having a joint bank account that you don't have access to the online banking, the statements, because the other party does all of that, but then you don't know what's going on with that. It could be withholding child benefits, not paying the child benefits, not allowing you funds to, buy things such as clothes. Or it could be the case that you get a joint product with that person, they refuse to pay it, that makes you go into financial hardship, whether that be from the debt of that or from the credit scoring part of it. So it's very very wide sort of range, and everybody's experience is very similar in certain circumstances, but can also be really different as well.
So yeah, so how would you actually define no, not define, but how would financial and economic abuse actually affect a person's overall mental health and ability to actually escape abusive situations?
Yeah, I mean, with economic and financial abuse, depending on how it is for that person, but for example, if we use my sort of experience, so which it's really actually very common. When I was going through it, I thought I was the only person going through this. Like there must be a way up, but actually, hundreds and thousands of people go through the same experience with, say, a joint mortgage product. Where someone refuses to pay. So when someone's refusing to pay and it's not safe for you to live in that property, you're then having to flee that property. But the majority of people flee that property with next to nothing, leave all their stuff behind, or, they may have just that joint bank account, so they don't have access to funds, so they have to open a sole bank account. Depending on how much money someone has, if they have a job, would depend on obviously if they can financially support themselves. Is there somewhere for them to actually flee to? And generally speaking, this is how people actually end up getting trapped and remain in these sorts of abusive relationships, because they don't have the financial means or say the support network around them. Maybe they've been going through coercive control and emotional abuse where that individual has isolated them from family, friends. So actually they feel very isolated and alone, and they've got no sort of support system around them to be able to leave. But it could also be, you've seen cases as well where an individual takes that person's cards or, everything. So then they literally have no money and nothing to even leave with.
Wow, yeah, it is very much a control and a power trip, that they have. And do you find that majority of abusers do tend to be, do tend to fall under the category of narcissism and just toxic people?
Yes, 100%. Like anybody that's doing any form of like economic and financial abuse, it is a form of control. It's a form of coercive control, and it's because they want to be in control of everything. And so it could fall down that sort of category of narcissism, and very, very toxic at the very least. Of that is, because it's not okay.
It's not okay, yeah. And so, can you share any examples of systemic issues within the financial institutions that may make it difficult for abuse victims to actually access the resources that they need?
Yeah, I think because economic and financial abuse is spoken about a lot more than what it was, but it wasn't really identified as such as a main form of abuse, and people weren't really aware of it. And I think sometimes victim survivors don't realise that their bank is there to support them and can support them. Obviously, the banks have got a long way to go, but they have started, and there's major progress happening in the financial sector. But some people don't know that banks are there to support them. If they don't have a specific page on domestic abuse for them to search, they might feel that they won't get the support or understanding. If they don't have specific vulnerability sort of helplines or specific teams, they may not get the right support either. Also, if they have bad experiences, for example, if they've rung up their bank about something else and they've had a poor customer sort of outcome where they haven't got the answer that they wanted or haven't got the support, that may put a barrier up for them people to actually go back to their bank and actually trust their bank to do that. And it's sort of understanding what supports can be offered by the bank. And every bank is different. They don't all they align as much as they possibly can. But one bank might have loads of supports for financial and economic abuse, but another bank might only be starting out looking into that and may only have a couple of support. So, it really does depend on the bank.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, in your own experience, your workplace was a source of support during your experience. So, what role do you think other workplaces play in either supporting or hindering survivors of abuse?
Yeah, I think the workplace is like it's the main place that you go to every single day, right? It's where you spend multiple hours a week at work around work colleagues, whether that be remotely or in person. And you cannot just, when you're going through domestic abuse or really most life events, you can't just leave it behind and start your job like, clock in at 9 o'clock and be like, forget about that until 5 o'clock. So it's going to impact your work, especially with the financial and economic abuse part. It's the stress, the weight on the shoulders on you, that you can't really focus on other things because you've got that going on in the background. So workplaces really need to be able to sort of identify that, have an open space, management that are really understanding, empathetic, to support that. And also workplaces should have domestic abuse policies in place for their staff that they can use. And then domestic abuse policies can be referred to by management as well for guidance and support. And it should, include what is domestic abuse, what is them types of abuse, and what supports can we offer. That includes sort of providing extra days annual leave, so you don't have to take annual leave out of your own entitlement to go to court, for example, or making sure that if you need your salary a little bit early, perhaps that's something that like your workplace can facilitate, or making sure that they can help you change your phone number, your address, or lots of different things like risk assessments, whatever. It has to be victim survivor led, so whatever that person needs, because it's not one size fits all. So let them tell you what they need or what support they want out of X, Y, and Z that you offer. But having them supports there just really help. And especially even like just to start with, raise awareness of the topic within your workplace. Have a charity come in and do a talk, even just an hour oversight talk of domestic abuse, what it is. So it's on people's faults, so they know. Because most people, unless you've experienced it or know someone that has, or you're in that industry of work, you're not really going to know much about it, unless perhaps you might hear it in the news, because it's in the news quite a lot. So yeah, workplaces they're really important, because if you don't get that support in your workplace, you may not be able to move forward with your life and get the support. That may make you want to leave your job, and then that could cause financial difficulty for the individual as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So support is everything, and you're right in the fact that if you do feel isolated and alone, and I'm just again, it takes me back 10 years to my own experience of financial abuse, and I know just how how stressful it is, and just how much it can really impact your mental health, and especially knowing that you're doing this alone and there's no one else there who understands or who can help you. So I think, yeah, support is everything. But yourself, you've actually been well, I think you've actually developed some initiatives or policies to actually it's better support individuals impacted by financial abuse. And can you discuss more about that?
Yeah, so my idea that I won Young Bank of the Year with was a fair financial future for sufferers and survivors of domestic abuse. So that was made up of 4 points. It started with raising awareness. So all of this started in my own sort of workplace, but obviously due to my LinkedIn following, quite a lot of people were interested in that. So I was able to help other financial sectors and any other sort of sector, mainly in the financial sector, because that's where my contacts are. But it was raising awareness. So that was sharing my lived experience. So I would do that through charities. I work very closely with charities such as Surviving Economic Abuse, also known as SEE. I also do a lot of work in Northern Ireland as well. So Women's Aid NI is another one that I've done lots of talks for, but then I'll do talks independently for people as well. So that's sharing my lived experience or explaining what sort of financial and economic abuse is. And I think because a lived experience is so powerful, being able to share my story, not everybody can or feels comfortable to, and that's absolutely fine, but I'm able to have that platform to share my story that people can relate to. And actually it doesn't just raise awareness to all the colleagues, all the individuals listening, but that could actually trigger someone to think, oh wait, that's happened to me, and not realize until that light bulb moment goes ahead. So it's all about raising awareness and doing talks. I do webinars, podcasts, newspaper articles. I've been in the media, lots of different things just to raise that awareness. The second point was training. So for the financial sector specifically, because I work in the financial sector, but, it's really important for them to be able to put their customer first and understand what their customers may be experiencing, is to get training. And that's the same with other workplaces that have obviously customer facing roles, but to get that sort of specific training. So again, working very closely with different charities. Again, for me, would be Surviving Economic Abuse, because they are solely a charity that focuses on economic and financial abuse, which is very helpful in the financial sector. But then also your likes of Women's Aid, and then also, you know, even thinking about getting training from other sort of types of abuse. So abuse of older people. So like Hourglass, a charity that's brilliant for that. You've got the Mankind Initiative for domestic abuse that focuses on men. You know, lots of different sort of avenues you can take there. And then updating policies and procedures. So obviously, as I said, the workplace policy, like I brought out one of the workplace policies that was from my lived experience for my workplace. And I've been able to help other very large companies create domestic abuse policies, because, you know, I just saw it as it started, it was like, what did I need and what were the things that I would have liked to see. So you put that in place, and then it can just evolve each year as time goes on. What other supports can we offer? So having that is just like a safety net for, you know, people that are going through domestic abuse. Different sort of like products and initiatives. So like obviously where I work in the financial sector, it would be like being able to open a bank account without the need for normal identification and proof of address, because you may not have that. That may be in a property that you can't access. You know, like sort of different sort of initiatives, like being able to change your address, and making sure that, you know, you don't have bank accounts that can tell where your location is, sort of thing as well. So lots of different sort of initiatives and stuff. And then also my main ones was to provide lending for those that had poor credit scoring due to no fault of their own. So again, that come off my lived experience. As I said, credit scoring was terrible, that I couldn't even get a phone contract out in my name, let alone anything else. So being able to look solely at affordability, so income and expenditure, and seeing like someone can actually afford that, you, instead of just looking at a credit scoring system, which I kind of say is kind of like a prison sentence in itself, because as we all know, when you have poor credit and you have even just a missed payment, that stays on your credit scoring for a lengthy amount of time. So if you had multiple debts, multiple issues due to domestic abuse, why should you be penalised for that for years and years later? So then that was an initiative that I launched in my workplace as well. So it's just always just raising awareness, trying to do better, even sort of things like putting posters in the toilets, in the back of the cubicles on domestic abuse helplines, you know, because that's a place where you're always going to be on your own. So, you know, you can do that and look at that without like wondering, oh, is anybody looking at me or seeing that I'm doing that? So it's just different things. It just keeps evolving and doing as much as possible to really help people.
Yeah. Oh, wow. There's so much there. And it's just stuff that you wouldn't even think about on a daily basis, you know, like yeah, the inability to actually open up like a phone contract. Oh, wow. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, that really would be a phenomenal initiative. So yeah, I salute you on just thinking about these things. And I guess the reason why you know about this is because it's all lived experience. You know, you went through this through thick and thin, and yeah, I'm really happy that you're now out there making a difference and
Yes.
being the change maker.
Yes.
So, how about like frontline staff? The ones that are on the phone
Yeah.
when when like the first time you're obviously calling them. So how do you think they can be better trained to recognize and support their customers?
Yeah, I think it's really important for frontline staff that have, that speak to customers day in, day out, to have that training, to have training from a specialised charity. And they can look at and tailor their training to your industry, what you work as, and they'll look at case studies as well. And like, how would you respond to that? See how you would respond. And this is the best and most appropriate way to respond. So, making sure that, obviously if someone discloses domestic financial economic abuse, making sure that we say, like, thank you for sharing that, it must have been really difficult for you to share that. So that opens it up straight away. Making sure that we repeat what they said, like to make sure that we've got it correct, so not just presuming X, Y, and Z, or I think I heard this, but making sure we've got it all right. And then seeing what supports can we, as whatever industry you work as, offer to you, because 9 times out of 10, that victim survivor is going to know sort of what they want from you. If that's a bank, for instance, and say they have a joint account, they want to be removed from that joint account. Or if they have a mortgage that is, they want to go into repossession, they just want you to get on with that, so they'll tell you what they want. And then also, when they do tell you that, making sure that that is recorded with consent on their file, on their case, so they don't have to repeat their story, because that is something that I've experienced, and I know multiple victim survivors have. We have to constantly repeat it, and actually it can be re-traumatizing having to re-talk about that, especially when you're in such a low point, because when you are going through the midst of it, you don't want to have to keep resharing to whoever. Like, if it's already on the system, unless they've got a follow-up question of it, they shouldn't have to retell it again.
Very true. Yeah, absolutely. Goodness, yeah. So there's a lot that can be done there. And so for somebody now who may be listening, who may be experiencing economic abuse, what would you actually recommend as some first steps for them to reclaim financial independence and safety?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is, obviously, that we believe you, and take your time, take a breath, and it does get better. And I'd say this to people all the time. I have lots of people that have lived experience that will see my posts and may message me privately to disclose, or share that it resonates with them.
Mm.
um, and that's why I share my journey of, I'm still in that journey, because unfortunately it's not a quick hit, but I'm still within that journey. But it gives people hope that there is light at the end of a very, very long tunnel. So the reassurance part, but then also the next steps, I would always start by recommending, when it comes to financial and economic abuse, get your credit scoring, like a copy of your credit file. Okay, so there's free credit referencing agencies. You've got Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, but there is a company called Check My File. You can get 30 days free trial. Okay, so then that actually gives you all the information for all free, because actually credit referencing agencies, one may hold one thing on you, say one loan that isn't actually yours, and one may not have that but have something completely different, so they don't align. So download that, have a little look, because that's where it all starts from, really, your credit scoring. If something's incorrect on there, it could be damaging for your financial sort of life. So, check on there. Is your name right? Is the address right? Are you on the electoral? All them sort of different things. Then have a look at the open credit agreement. So that will have even like your bank accounts, have different things like loans, credit cards, whatever you've got. And you can see, and you can make sure, firstly, that these are actually yours, because, we've seen many cases where people have a look at that and they go, actually, that's not my loan. I haven't got a loan like that. And it could be that the perpetrator's got that out in their name without them realizing, So have a little look. What have you got outstanding that's showing that's negatively impacting or is still open? And work step by step with that. And then say, for instance, there's a joint loan on there, say it's defaulted, which means that obviously it hasn't been paid. Reach out to that bank. So what you can do is Surviving Economic Abuse, also known as SEA, amazing charity, as I keep saying, but they have lots of information all about different forms of financial and economic abuse, which is a great reference. But they also have the banking directory. So the banking directory, you can, I think it's a drop down. I was trying to think, is it a drop down or is it you type the bank in? But either way, you can look up your bank, and then what that will show is what your bank offers. So it will give you the web page that is all about domestic abuse. It will give you the correct helpline number, because we all know with financial sectors that 9 times out of 10 they've got about 100 different numbers for different departments, so you don't know which one to ring. That will tell you the correct one to ring. It will also tell you what supports they offer. So whether that be they'll open you a bank account without the need of ID or proof of address, that they can split a joint bank account. They'll also tell you if they're part of the Financial Abuse Code. So the Financial Abuse Code was created by UK Finance, and that is a code that is the banks sign up for and they're a signatory to. Only certain banks, not all banks, it's not mandatory, but it's a pledge as such to do more for victim survivors. So when you know that they're part of that, you've got a bit more comfort that that is on their agenda 100%. That is on their agenda. So then you can reach out, and there are different financial institutions. And I say it's not just banks, building societies, all that. If they're on there, or you can just go on their website, search domestic abuse, have a little look at their website. There'll be different ways to disclose, or, you know, for them to talk to. And it could be like, as I say, they're all different, but it could be a form online that you fill out, which might be less, you know, pressure for you to, you know, build up the courage to actually have to speak to a human. You could type it all out, or they could have a chat function through their online banking app, or it could be a telephone number. So, you know, reach out to them, explain the situation, ask them to record it on your file, and see what they can do for you. It may be a case that they can sort out X, Y, and Z, or close sort of things as well. And another thing with the check my file for the credit scorings is if there's something that isn't right, you can raise a dispute through them as well, and they will contact the provider on your behalf. So the provider will then come back and say, right, we'll remove it, or they may come back and say, can you contact us? And then you'll know to contact them. So that's sort of my sort of first step of getting everything in order. There's also charities and organisations such as Money Advice Plus. They have the financial helpline, which you can call if you have any sort of financial abuse concerns or you don't know where to turn. They can signpost you, they can give you some form of support on what to do next as well. So there's lots of different things as a starting point of getting everything organised, get it together. As I say, unfortunately, in this sort of situation, it's not always a quick hit. Okay, and it all depends on what type of, like, what you want to actually deal with and what you're going through. But they're from my experience as a lived experience, but also from working in the banking sector. That would be my recommendations. But if you do contact a financial institution and you don't get the support that you feel that they should have provided to you, I always say to people, make sure you complain, because complaints, they know that then they'll have to look at that and try and make that right for you. So complain. And if they can't do that, you can then escalate that to the Financial Ombudsman Service, which will make sure that there's a fair outcome for both. So that is something that I always recommend. I have done that myself. I've had success. I'm not saying that everybody would have the success, but I did. So I always recommend that as well. So yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, because I know with the financial ombudsman, they're always like 6 months delayed, aren't they, in actually dealing with the cases. I think that's fantastic that it worked for you.
It did work for me, and they were in the Financial Ombudsman Service, as I always say, actually, when I share my lived experience, was life changing. They were the people that changed my life financially. You know, they were the people that actually got my credit scoring rectified in regards to my mortgage, because obviously it was showing for over 3 years of crap, as I like to say. But yeah, so obviously I've got other aspects of the financial and economic abuse I'm still unfortunately working through. But with that, that's my main sort of part. And if it wasn't for the Financial Ombudsman Service, that would probably still be showing negatively on my credit file.
Wow, fantastic. Oh, I love this. You are walking success. Well done. And I know, that it's quite normal to not want to discuss this with your family and friends out of
Mhm.
shame and, self-blame. So, what do you think close friends and family can actually do to help support somebody who may be dealing with this type of abuse?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, because I always say to people as well, like, I remember I'm a very open person. So when I was going through it all, obviously my family knew, but like every friend knew, everybody knew, that's in my contact list, so to speak. And my contact list isn't massive, by the way, but, all my friends and family knew. But actually, if I could go back, that wouldn't be the case for me. And because people that haven't experienced it, and you haven't realized that you have until then, so you're still learning, you will get different opinions from different people, and some will be really helpful, some not so helpful. And
Mm.
that's not out of people being, well, hopefully not out of people being spiteful, but it's because they don't have the understanding, so they shouldn't really make massive comment on it. But what I'd say from a family and friend point of view is listen, just let the person talk as much as they need to talk. Tell them that you're there for them through whatever means, and that's the main sort of thing, really, like just listening and if you want to educate yourself on it, have a little Google, educate yourself, like, read a charity's website, just to sort of understand it a little bit more. But it's the main thing is it's allowing someone to just let it all off their shoulders. Problem shared is a problem halved, or whatever the word is, but let them just share that and just be there for them, a shoulder to cry on. But as I say to victim survivors, choose that wisely. Choose, maybe a couple of your family, but maybe just a couple of very, very close friends that you can trust and rely on, just so then you don't get that mixed sort of opinions, and then you're in two minds going, should I do this, should I do that, when really it's your decision. Sometimes it is difficult. I remember myself being like, I don't know what to do, and you want reassurance from other people, but really, if they don't have the experience, apart from being there for you, they can't tell you what to do. You need to make that decision for yourself. And that's when you can ring up domestic abuse helplines, really and truly, if you wanted to get that sort of advice, or some suggestions from people that are trained in that area. Sorry, you're just on mute.
Oh, sorry. I think what might be useful would be to actually add in some links as well for, the resources and organizations that you actually recommend for individuals, just so that, they have like direct links. So I can definitely do that. And so, what are your hopes now for the future regarding how society and financial institutions handle this type of abuse?
Yeah, so there's so much. I would just love it if they'd just do absolutely everything, but it's a slow burner, but there's progress being made. And the main thing that I would like to see, and the main two things really, and again, from my lived experience, because I feel like that's what's impacted me the most. That might not be the same for other people, but that has what's impacted me. So the main thing would be the credit referencing agencies tackling the credit scoring, because at the moment you can put a notice of correction on your credit scoring, which is a very short sentence or note, and you can put like domestic abuse survivor. But realistically, financial institutions or anybody you're getting some form of lending or who need to credit check you can see it, but doesn't have to act on it or put that into consideration. So I feel like the credit scoring itself, if we're going to continue to have that credit scoring, which I call a prison sentence, let's not make it a prison sentence. Let's actually be able to explain the situation, like let them be able to actually have a bit that says, I've got this bad credit scoring, it's no fault of my own. I had perfect credit scoring before that. Maybe that may be the case. It was for me. And I have got the income and expenditure and the affordability to actually be able to get that product. So please don't just refer to that. So the credit referencing agencies and whoever else, other stakeholders that need to be involved, whether that be the financial institutions or the government or whatever, they need to tackle that part. And then the second one for me is joint mortgages. It's none of it is straightforward, and it's a very difficult sort of lending aspect to remove yourself from. Obviously, if you're married, then you go through the divorce settlement, but that's not as easy, because you could be provided in the divorce settlement that property that still has a mortgage on it, but if you do not meet the mortgage criteria for that financial institution, they might say, well, we can't put it in your name, and then you're stuck. Or if you're not married and it's just like a normal partnership, you haven't really got a leg to stand on, really, because unless that person agrees to sign it over or whatever, it's not going to happen in these cases. Then you're just stuck, and you've got two options, really. The option is to go down the repossession route, which I must say, very traumatic from my experience. But then also, you can go to court, but that costs thousands and thousands of pounds that people just do not have when they're going through that. Like, that's just a fact. So something needs to be done with that, so it's easier to remove yourself when you are going through that form of abuse. If you're not living in that property, why should you be paying for that property? And if that person's not paying bull and you can tell that they're not, why are we not allowing for something to happen? And I don't know what that may be. So they're sort of my sort of main things, as I say, from my experience, but there's so much more that could be done, but they would be my main two things, but probably the largest things that will take a few years to do.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. And hopefully it gives people out there some insights as to how, how support can actually be improved. And in terms of yourself, what's next for you on this amazing journey?
Yeah, I think what's next for me is I'm still going through elements of financial and economic abuse, which haven't been, amazing, but we're talking about CCJs, which are county court judgments. And again, you've got you could have a perfect credit score, in which technically I do now, apart from that, that you can't get a basic bank account, you can't do anything. So really you're just stuck in that situation again. So working through that, which I'll update people in due course, I'm sure, when something actually comes from that, because it has been another painful struggle where actually there's not much knowledge on that area. So it's really difficult. But then also from like a working perspective, to continue to do my talks, work with the charities that are very close to my heart, and also remain in my career in the banking sector, being a vulnerability specialist. I specialise in all different vulnerabilities, but obviously the main one for me is always going to be domestic, financial and economic abuse. It's very close to my heart, but ensuring that, work very closely with other financial sectors, just to see what more can be done, get them initiatives in place so we can support customers and victim survivors going through this, so they don't have to go through the hardship as such with the banks like I did.
Fantastic. Wow. Thank you so much, Rosie. It's been such an honor having you on, and just, your experience and your insights have just been phenomenal. And it's opened up my eyes to economic and financial abuse, which I didn't even know about. And I've gone through it as well. And that just shows, that there's such a lack awareness out there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just hope that, things do change and improve, and they make it easy for victims of this type of abuse. And I think you're doing fantastic work. So keep going.
Thank you so much.
Wow, amazing. So that's all we have time for today, my friends. And if you have any questions about this episode, or if you're currently a victim of financial economic abuse and you require some support, then please do reach out. I'm sure Rosie would appreciate hearing from you, and I know I would too. And yeah, we look forward to serving you the best that we can. And I look forward to seeing you on the next show. Take care, my friends. Bye.